welcome back to Rethink Healthcare. Today we have, well, I'm Tanya, by the way, that's Paul, and this is Jade.
Hi.
We have a special guest today. So today we're going to be talking about Generation Z as it relates to almost anything, but specifically, of course, we're going to be talking about nursing since that's our focus.
Yes, the article is about, it came from emerging RN leaders, and the topic is leading Generation Z nurses. And we picked this article just because part of this episode or part of this series really is to look at how do we attract and retain.
Exactly.
So as leaders in the field, we thought it would be good to actually have this knowledge on what are the pitfalls that could be going on.
And of course, Generation Z is going to be our pool of incoming nurses.
Yes.
Right? So Jade is here today. Jade is normally our camera person, but now she's in front of the camera because she does not want us to trash her generation. So she is our generation. She is our spokesperson for the Generation Z group of people.
I feel bad for Gen Z. All right, let's roll.
Exactly.
The article.
So the article was interesting because it was about a nursing officer who had somebody who was quitting in her pool of people who was a Generation Z nurse. And she learned a lot from this person. And we're going to go through all of this one by one. So I'm not going to talk too much about it. But we're gonna focus on the points that were made in the article, and we're gonna discuss.
Well,
that's what we're doing.
I think it is,
aren't we?
Yeah, let's bring up the point too. I believe that this became interesting is because this person didn't quit because of money,
yes,
or because of time. This person quit because of how her generation seemed like is being managed.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with finance.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with the opportunity that she had or the pay that she was getting. It had more to do with how she felt as an employee in this institution.
Yeah, on how she was treated. But it kind of transcended more into how does a CEO or anybody in leadership in nursing who is going to be, well, I guess it's considered either a baby boomer or a Gen X, right?
Right. Which
interfaces with the either a millennial or a Gen Z.
Yeah. So just for perspective, we are both from the Generation X group, and we of course have a very different viewpoint on how we view being an employee, being employed, the relationship with our employer, things like that. And it's not unusual or it's not uncommon to know that as Generation X people, we were kind of left to our own devices, and we kind of had to just figure things out. So we didn't have a whole lot of hand holding. So you're in a different, I'm the beginning of Generation X because I was born in 1966. You're toward the end, though not toward the end, not all the way to the end. So you're somewhere in the late middle.
Yeah, but also I guess in my own personal experience, it's also a bit unique because I'm also an immigrant.
Yeah, that's true too.
So do I necessarily fit into the mold of what Gen X, like I wasn't born in this country, so for me, I automatically already had two world views from the start.
Right.
So
anyway, so from my standpoint, it was to be very independent.
Yes.
And that's just the way it was. I wasn't given a choice, and that is generally from an American, somebody who grew up in America's viewpoint. That's just how it is with Generation X people. You, again, were different, a little bit different because of your background. But so some of the so we're going to go a little bit point by point, and we're going to talk about the first thing we're talking about, which I do actually think is probably the most important thing, is Generation Z. And you're going to jump in and say when you agree or disagree. We should be focusing on the relationship with that person, which may or may not have been historically something that was happening.
So let me just get this straight. So it's more leadership, developing some sort of rapport relationship with the employee itself, as opposed to
even before concentrating on the actual job that needs to be done, the relationship should be developed.
I don't know, what do you think?
I don't I kind of agree, but I don't completely agree in the fact that I feel like when you're talking about a relationship, you don't have to be friends with everyone. But I think there does come a point where even if you're my boss, I would like you to treat me with some respect and treat me like a human being and not just your workhorse.
Okay.
But not in the fact that you have to become friends before you start working, but at least treat someone with a level of respect.
Yeah. And I think that's the point that's being made here.
I think that's just common human decency.
It is.
I agree. So I don't necessarily think that it's a generational gap per se between, you're like a Gen X leader into a Gen Z employee. I mean, I think that's just, as you've mentioned, that's just a matter of human nature as far as treat each other with respect.
Yeah, that's true, but I don't think that I came from that expectation.
Really?
Yeah.
So
I
what
would take a job, and I would assume that I am the employee, and I had relatively little relationship with my boss, and I either did a good job and stayed at that position, or I didn't do a good job and I didn't, and the relationship between me and my boss didn't matter so much.
So it's more like an authoritarian approach?
Maybe not totally, but more. That's. I'm just telling you how I felt as an employee, as a young person, because we're talking about Generation Z, and they're young people. So we don't know what Gen Z is going to be looking like when they're our age.
See, I identify more with Gen. What are you, Gen Z?
Gen Z.
Yeah, I identify more. I
think it should be.
I'm young and hip,
I think it should be like a tough love type of situation. I mean, he's my boss and he's my dad too. So there comes a level where, yes, he has to make sure I do my job right, but it also comes to a point where he treats me as a human and not just as someone that's doing work for him and that he's paying.
Is that a compliment to me?
I mean, you're my dad, so I'd hope that you don't treat me like an object. But
all right, let's go to the next question.
All right, so the next point is that Gen Z is more self-directed and independent than previous generations, but often lacks the real-world wisdom and street smarts. I don't know that I feel like I was very independent, but what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure. I think it really depends person to person.
Yeah, the independent.
Like, it's a personality thing a lot of the time. Like, I know people that can be very independent and that prefer to be independent. I know people that hate working in teams and suck at working in teams. And I know people that can do anything.
Yeah.
I actually think that Gen Z is less independent.
I kind of agree. I feel like as we'll go through the rest of these points, that kind of is made clear that I do feel like Gen Z is a little bit less independent and more,
need a bit more of a hand-holding type.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I mean,
yeah.
Do you think your generation is like that?
I think I'm fine. But I do know people that are, like, need a little bit more help with things and needs, like, more assistance.
Yeah.
He's always taught me to be independent and just figure it out. So I think a lot of it also comes down to who you're being raised by.
Yeah, that's true.
So maybe in the fact that your generation was so independent and was left to kind of fend for yourselves, maybe when you had your kids, you wanted to help them more and hold their hand.
Maybe.
Is that where the helicopter parenting was born?
Maybe. I mean, definitely my generation seemed to be a bit more helicopter-ish. Probably because we knew how we grew up.
I mean, I'm watching Grey's Anatomy right now, and Meredith Grey had kids, and she desperately doesn't want to be like her mother because of her childhood issues. So I think it plays a role, your childhood, into how you parent your kids.
Okay.
All right, so it's not necessarily generational then.
Maybe not. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Maybe it's just a cycle.
Yeah. Well, yes, it absolutely is a cycle, as you've just demonstrated. Because that person in that show has then swung back to the other side where they're letting their child be more independent. Is that what I'm understanding you say?
Well, her kids are still really young at this point. I'm not all the way through the show.
Okay.
But
I did watch at the beginning, but I
could give you a whole Grey's Anatomy debrief.
All right, but anyway, Another point is Generation Z wants to be talked with and not talked to.
That comes back to the respect.
Okay.
And I think there are points where, again, like the tough love, you should expect, you're not able to just get away with anything. You have to do your job. But it also comes down to maybe listen to our ideas because we have more to offer than just
being there.
Writing numbers on a screen.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's just strict leadership per se. I don't think it's a generational issue. I think it's just from leadership style. With or maybe more Gen X is more, like you said, bit more on the authoritarian side that wants to just dictate. Here's how it's done.
Yeah.
There's no other deviation from this. You know what I mean? As in school when we learn about leadership styles, you have your authoritarian, you have your democratic leadership, you have your transformational leadership. Really, but it's all situational based.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if we're running a code, there is no, well, how should we take care of this patient?
Yes, exactly.
Hit the damn paddles, you know? I mean, it's just no,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, to a certain extent, this profession is going to be a certain way because of the profession, right?
Yeah.
So I think we agree that there should be a healthy mix of talking with the Generation Z employee as well as sometimes there has to be real direction too.
This feels like you're just talking about how humans should be treated. Was
Okay,
this not how it's supposed to be during your generation? Did you not expect basic human decency?
No, I think we did. It was just a different mindset from that. So we're not talking about how we're doing things. We're talking about how Gen Z expects things to be done.
But think about this too, right? Why is the cliche of nurses eat their young? I mean, that is born for a reason. And a lot of your senior nurses are really quite mean and rude to newer nurses.
Well, I don't necessarily know why that is, other than the fact that it's in a very important job, and you can't be messing around doing stupid things.
Well, I also think some of it is like you kind of climb the ladder, and I think it's kind of just human nature too, because in personal experience, even just like the way I just graduated 8th grade, I'm going to high school next year, the way that we looked at like the younger people in like the middle school, we didn't like them because they think they're everything when they're not.
That's funny.
And the high schoolers are looking at you like, who's this little
No, we expect it.
freshman crap?
We know we don't get to choose our lunch table. We sit wherever we can after all the seniors and upperclassmen have chosen where they want to sit. That's just how it works. But it doesn't mean that we treat the 5th and 6th graders like crap.
Okay.
I mean, we might like look at them weird when they try and take our lunch table when they probably shouldn't. But
I didn't know so territorial.
There was like such a politics there going on. All right, but let's move on a little bit in the interest of time. For Generation Z, words have power, and you must avoid microaggressions. Intent versus impact is real and doesn't always match. I mean, I think we're coming back to that same thing where where it's just basic human decency. Microaggression is so pervasive, though. It really is.
What is microaggression?
In the way I look at it is that I'm the boss and an employee does something that I don't like, and rather than go to that person and talk with them about it and say, you're doing this thing and I don't like it, I'm gonna be I kind of look at that as almost being a little passive aggressive too, where I might have punishing behavior toward that person. Not be nice to them, treat them with no respect, that kind of thing. I don't know. What do you think?
I think microaggressions, it's when like people don't feel like they're being respected necessarily, and like you might say something that it's passive aggressive in a way.
I think
But I mean, I also feel like, especially now in like my generation, there are times where it might be taken too far and it might be taken too much. Like anything can be a microaggression, just to kind of depending on how someone feels.
Yes.
But that's a bunch of topics that we probably shouldn't get into.
Yes, it probably is, because now we are talking about.
No, but here's my point though with this question is it's more words have power. And I believe in this generation, their communication style is definitely much shorter because they use text more. They'll use social media more as far as whatever those chat groups are. And those are all meant to be quick, short engagements.
Yeah.
So that's why for them words have power. Like a one word that's capitalized could really mean a lot.
And a prime example is when you
Yeah.
answer someone K on a text, just a K. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
That's not a happy okay.
So, but I think the gap is between the older generation not necessarily understanding what these smaller words may mean. Like for us, I'm a bit more formal in communication. Like to me, like don't if you want to have a discussion, don't text me. Pick up the phone and talk to me. I do that to you. I mean, don't send me a text. You need to talk to me. Give me a call.
But then you get mad when I ignore your texts.
Yeah, because
You're sending me articles I'm not gonna read.
All right, so
So I think it's the words more that, to me, what I got from that is those words, the older generation needs to understand that you have to be very careful with the words that you choose and how that generation will perceive that word.
I don't think that's necessarily, I feel like sometimes my generation can be a lot when it comes to getting offended by things. When it comes to the K thing, you're gonna overthink that because just kind of like how it's perceived. There's so many jokes about it online about if someone sends you K, they're mad.
Yeah, exactly. It's mostly true.
But in the same sense, I do think my generation does value talking in person. There's a lot of times, there's certain times where it's necessary, and even people my age know that it's necessary to talk in person, serious conversations. If you're trying to confront someone, do you always want to do it over text? It's much more mature to do it face to face. But if you're doing it over text,
I mean, in this context, we're not talking about texting. You're talking about.
I don't know nothing about nursing.
No, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about in the employee-employer context. You're generally, I'm not going to say it never happens because it absolutely does, but generally this isn't happening by text. It's usually, you're working with somebody face to face.
Exactly.
Now, having said that,
I disagree.
in nursing, that's true. I know what you're going to say. I already know what you're going to say. Because there's a lot of remote work happening, and then it is by text, but
or Teams or however mode they have. All right, let's go to the next question because we gotta look at our time.
Gen Z expects to have a voice in decision making. I think we can all kind of agree with that, right?
Yeah, I'm sure you. Well, I guess with the authoritarian generation, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it the derogatory way, but in the
that was a microaggression.
Yeah. An example of it. So so what is it? You're Gen X, right?
Yeah.
So
so are you?
Well, but I'm in a weird space. so in the Gen X, where it is maybe a bit more authoritarian, so maybe sometimes they say, okay, I have more wisdom, I've been doing this longer, here's how we do it.
Yeah.
And then maybe your generation will say, you didn't even ask me my opinion.
Right, there might be a better way.
Yeah, so that's where a clash could occur.
I don't think we would disagree on that at all.
Yeah.
Right? Do you agree? Jade?
I'm thinking, hold on.
Okay.
I mean, yes, but at the same time, I understand it's not always necessary to have someone lowers opinion, but I mean there's situations where maybe they might have an opinion, but there's other times where it's such a basic decision, it's ridiculous to ask them, and if they get offended, why are you offended about that?
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so it's
right.
I mean there's levels to everything.
Yeah, it's situational base. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, what else we got?
We have Gen Z craves mentorship.
I've seen that. Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree with it too, but I don't know that that's unique to Gen Z, honestly.
What do you think?
I mean, I could say yes for Gen Z. I mean, being taken under someone's wing, being able to admire their work and learn from them, I think is a big is something that I think a lot of people want. I don't know, I'm not able to speak for other generations.
Well, I mean, I mentor people when I have nurse practitioner students, and I was thinking, but actually, most of my students are. No, they're probably more. No, they might be Gen Zs. What's the older end of Gen Z? Do we
It's
remember?
probably like at least mid-20s.
Right.
I think it started in like the 90s.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I probably am that's probably who I'm mentoring actually. Yeah. Right now is Gen Zs. So, and they do, I see it, but again, it's the type of job too. You want, as a student, as an NP student, you want to like suck up and soak up wisdom from somebody who's been doing it for a long time.
I mean, here's one of the things I learned, when Drew Brees retired, one big thing I learned from this, he said there's 3 things as a professional that you have to keep in mind, right? You master your craft.
Yeah.
And then you mentor. After you master something, you mentor. Mm-hmm. And then you make a difference. So maybe as professionals get older, mm-hmm. keep those 3 things in mind, that if you've already mastered your craft, you start mentoring others, mentor the next generation. Right? And then after you've done that, then you look at, okay, how do I then make a difference in this world?
You are making a difference if you do that, to me. Yeah.
I don't think it's unique to one generation.
I don't think it is either.
It's just,
I don't think this is.
I think it's just a general like human craving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're gonna have to wrap up, and I think we're probably gonna need to do a second video on this, but
all right, we'll do the last one and then we'll...
Yeah, Gen Z, when giving Gen Z feedback, separate the performance or action from the person.
That's just leadership.
I think that's just leadership too.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, I will, that's not, there's plenty of people in leadership positions who don't do that. Like if somebody performs poorly in their job, it is translated to that person is just not,
Well, maybe that leader wasn't really meant to be a leader.
Well, agreed.
Maybe they had just gotten promoted by...
Yeah. I mean, again, I think maybe that is also one that isn't unique to Gen Z.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we've butted into our time limit now, right? So should we just carry on maybe the next episode we'll wrap up with these?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I think there's a lot more to discuss. So
there is definitely a lot more to discuss,
Anyway, thank you, Jade. Thank you for joining us. I guess you have one more episode with us then to defend your generation.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking forward to seeing you on part 2 of this discussion. Bye.
Bye.